Good morning or afternoon, depending on what part of the country you're in. My name is Jeff Eaton from the Informs Military Applications Society, and on behalf of Commander Walt DeGrange, also from Informs Mass, and Mrs. Julie Seaton from Moores, we'd like to welcome you to the third bi-monthly joint Moores Informs Mass Student WebEx. As you know, in May of 2012, Moores and Informs Mass kicked off a new joint student membership program as a benefit to the students. We're offering these bi-monthly webinars designed to appeal to our joint student members with topics driven by their interest and needs. If you need any more information about the program, then I want to call your attention to the links on the slide that's on the screen right now. One for Moores and one for Informs Mass, and they have more further detail on the programs. A few ground rules for today's event. Please, we ask you that you keep your questions to the end. And if you want to utilize the chat feature as the presentations are going on, then Commander DeGrange will go ahead and keep a list of those questions and bring them up after our speakers finish. Okay, so for today's event, we're looking at how industry uses OR and analytics to support our military. And with that, we have two distinguished speakers from industry. The first will be Mr. Norm Ryder, the Senior Director of Analytics from Syngineering LLC, and also a Board of Director member for Moores. And he'll talk on how industry consulting to military problems and using OR methods. And then there'll be Mr. Jack Levi, Director of Process Management for UPS, and also the Vice President of Practice at Informs. And he'll speak to us today on how UPS is using analytics to support key planning and management decisions, as well as highlighting how Informs is embracing analytics to support military and industry decisions. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to my good friend, Mr. Norm Ryder. So Norm, over to you, buddy.
Hey, thanks, Jeff. And I appreciate you, Walt, and Julie putting on these student webinars for Moores and Mass, and I appreciate being invited to speak today. For students on the phone, I'm looking forward to your questions after Jack's presentation, and if questions go beyond that, feel free to connect to me, and you'll see some of my connection information a little bit later on. What I'd like to talk about in the next 20 minutes is basically, I want to give you my perspective on operations research and how it supports different types of Department of Defense problems, military-type problems. And to do that, I'll give you some examples of past work, a lot of graphics here, so I have pictures in here for you, and I'll talk through them for you. And then I want to talk about some new frontiers of where operations research is emerging and making an impact on military operations, really using a combination of information technology methods, which we're calling analytics. And then, at the end of Jack's presentation, we'll be able to talk a little bit about what your thoughts are or answer some of your questions. So this is me. I am a Senior Director of Analytics for a small business called Syngineering LLC. I've spent 10 years of my career as a Marine Corps logistics officer, and then the past 9 years in industry, with a total of 12 years applying operations research to solve problems, and 12 years in counting, I should say. I have a Master's of Science in Operations Research from Naval Postgraduate School and a Bachelor's in Oceanography from the the U.S. Naval Academy. So you can see a scientist can become an operations research professional and do okay by it. As a Marine Corps logistics officer, I was responsible for leading and managing a variety of what we call logistics services, including supply and maintenance, transportation, different types of environmental, health, and safety type of activities for bases and stations, among other things. And then in my career as applying operations research, I've been modeling logistics systems, among other systems, for the past 12 years, to help make decisions at both the unit level and at the strategic levels of different military organizations. And then in the past 8 years, I've also been combining studies and analysis and analytics with information systems, and that's where my future perspective will come in. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the type of company that does this type of work that I'll be talking about. So this is Engineering. Um, we are a small business, and you've probably heard a lot about small businesses in election if you've paid attention to those. And there's a combination of businesses that provide DoD contracting support, large to small business. So I'll be talking about from the perspective of a medium and a small business side. Basically, in my business, what I focus on are three main areas: advanced analytics, or operations research, and business intelligence, or delivering the information to the decision maker, and then data analytics. So how do you combine different types of data to support your operations research methods? And certainly be happy to talk more about the different types of offerings that I show here underneath each of those core areas. The services that we provide using operations research include assessments, and those could be considered studies or analyses. They could also be assessments of how well your organization provides operations research support. Planning, this gets into developing implementation plans to help organizations improve their operations research or their application. And then development and integration gets into developing models, simulations, developing information solutions that are based on advanced analytics, and then integrating them within the organizations. So just a little bit of perspective of where I'm coming from and the type of company that you might want to join once you're done your academic stint to do this type of work. Okay. Let me talk a little bit about some of my thoughts about how operations research can effectively support Department of Defense problems. So the first is now is a good, and I should really say a great time for operations research and analytics in our national security environment. The current situation are declining budgets or less money with real logistics problems and real problems in general, but logistics problems are especially challenging because we have a global war on terror that the Department of Defense and our national security agencies are focusing on. So how can we support global operations with less money? That's a great operations research problem, and those problems are real and they're current. The second is to be effective as an analyst, we really need to tie together several different parts of what we do. So we need to creatively apply operations research, apply quality operations research, and at the same time, we need to be able to effectively integrate our results with the decision maker and their time frame and information needs. So thinking from a military perspective, there are long-term decisions that need to be supported, long-term budgetary decisions, for example, and how to organize the logistics base of the military organizations. And then there's very timely decisions that they need based on operational tempo. So we really need to understand how best to support the decision makers, which leads to the next bullet, basically shooting for robust analysis or being able to provide defendable analysis that's validated. And we need to do that in a timely fashion with simple presentation. So decision makers in the military don't always understand what we do as operations research analysts and really aren't interested in all the details, but they are interested in the results. And so they have to have faith in us that we're crunching the numbers right and we're coming up with the right answers for them based on their courses of action, and that we show that to them simply so that they don't get baffled within the numbers. Sometimes a little bit, we have some background noise. Sometimes a little bit quicker goes further than a lot longer. So like I said, responsiveness is key. Identifying the information that's necessary early and coming up with possibly an 80% solution is better if it's on time than a 99% solution that's past due. The last bullet is really related to when you look at real organizational changes, especially in the military, it takes years. So if you want to see a long-term shift in what you're doing from an operations research analyst perspective, you need to have a longer-term perspective. You need to stick around, but you also need to have a long-term perspective so that you know that your analysis when you do analysis for different types of organizations is helping guide towards that longer-term objective. There's just some thoughts up front. It helps frame some of the problems I'll be talking about and some of the analysis that I've been either in charge of developing, in charge of teams doing the analysis, or doing independently on my own. So this first example I want to show you is a military distribution problem. And this problem, there's a lot of pictures here, but this problem emerged out of Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom, which is still ongoing, where distribution has become a key focus area because of the long distances that our logistics has to travel combined with high-tempo operations. And so in this problem, what we did is, for the analysis, we used a scenario that we developed with the government to help them figure out how to improve their distribution capabilities over the long term. So this was looking 10 to 15 years out at the time to figure out how best to improve and what actions needed to be done now at the time to improve distribution for the next 10 to 15 years, based on this global war on terror. And so we came up with a scenario-based approach where we were looking at what type of distribution coordination capabilities and transportation and management capabilities were needed based on several different types of scenarios. The scenarios were had different types of operational tempo and intensity, from what we call low-intensity conflict, which is basically peacekeeping operations or very focused short-term military events, to longer-term events, which we call high-intensity conflicts, which require a lot more military power on the ground. And so what we did is we used this scenario approach to evaluate the different types of operational logistics support that are all tied together through distribution over different types of scenarios. And what we came up with was, and what we did is we used a combination of operations research techniques. First, we used scenario development, which in itself is an art, to make sure that the problem we were focusing on was correct, and that the basis for our analysis and the data was correct. And then we used optimization to come up with a variety of possible courses of action to lay down this future military distribution network based on these multiple intensity conflicts. After that, we narrowed down, using optimization, we narrowed down to a handful of different possible optimal distribution networks. And then we used discrete event simulation to really flesh out and have a higher fidelity approach to fleshing out what are the possible, what are the performance of those networks based on real-world disruptive events. And so that's really where our scenario came in. And based on that, we were able to come up with some very robust recommendations on how the Marine Corps could change their organizational processes, their organization in terms of what type of planning, coordination, and tracking organizations they have, their information technology support, and their capabilities on the ground. Next is a related analysis that we did, and this turned into a longer-term software development effort where we helped the Marine Corps establish its transportation management system. At the time, the Marine Corps really didn't have an effective transportation management system for their tactical vehicles. And so now all their vehicles are electronically dispatched, from coordination with their transportation movement requests to association to the vehicles and drivers and personnel that would be on those vehicles to delivery within their desired time frames. And so a key part of this was to come up with an optimization approach that would help the Marine Corps figure out how best to use that data. I call it the easy button. So once you have all this data available in your transportation management system, you want a way to easily figure out what is the potential best solutions. And so what we did is we helped them create an approach using a commercial less-than-truckload transportation system and optimization program to help them figure out how to coordinate these into convoys for security purposes. So where in commercial industry there's oftentimes high-priority shipments will be set with a less-than-truckload or other types of modes. In this case, the military needs to have long convoys so that they can ensure that they have the right level of security assets, vehicles with machine guns, with different types of firepower to fight off the enemy if those convoys are attacked, which was a less than optimal problem, but a real-world problem that we had to address. The next example, I'm moving into more of a readiness-based analysis example. And in this case, if you look at the upper right-hand corner, we're focused on Army aviation and focusing on the readiness or availability of helicopters and how to sustain that over time. A key part of this was to be able to capture the uncertainty in the demand stage, or as different types of parts failed on these helicopters, and then the uncertainty in the supply chain and the different stages, which are shown in the green part of this picture. On the bottom right, we use data from sensors to predict remaining useful life for the different components on the helicopters, and then we combine that with the current supply chain data to figure out what's the probability of stocking out or coming into a back order status, which degrades readiness. We use this for improved planning, and the whole reason was to basically at the enterprise level or across these blue level organizations is to help them reduce inventory costs by improving the type of data that could be provided, and then the information generated from algorithms based on operations research methods. This next slide is a follow-up example to that last one, and this is really helping the Army to figure out what their holy grail is, which is how much do I really need to invest for a certain level of readiness within my equipment fleet and within my aviation suite. So up on the top here, what we did is focused on providing decision support information based on things like readiness drivers and the ability to drill down into your readiness to understand what are your true cost drivers based on your current and projected level of availability. And to do that, what we did is we had many different types of data that represents the input data on the left-hand side, things like operational tempo, contract support costs, different types of supply maintenance and labor data. And we combined that with different types of predictors and different types of planning factors that we had to use different operations research methods like statistics and some simulation to figure out what those truly might be and to provide really good estimates to produce the outputs, which were visually oriented and graphically oriented results to understand your readiness versus cost type of constraints. And the whole approach here, once again, is to figure out what do I need to invest in or what does the military need to invest in over time to maintain support for this global war on terror. My last example shows some work that I did in Afghanistan, and this is a picture of Kandahar Airfield from the air. It's a little bit old. It's growing rapidly and pretty big now. But really, supporting deployed analysis requires a different tool set, or using the same tool set but a little bit differently, as I should say. Here you use different types of OR tools based on the time frame. The time frame in the operational environments are typically day-to-day or week-to-week, so you have higher op tempo, which require shorter decision and analysis cycles to support that op tempo. This is where really it gets messy. It's real-world stuff, and it actually gets pretty exciting. And if you ever have the opportunity to deploy into a local theater, whether it's Afghanistan or somewhere else around the world, it's pretty rewarding. So I'd recommend you take a shot of that. I just want to show you some kind of basic stuff that we did here. Our focus in this project was to basically to be able to collect logistics support contractor data. And this was performance and quality data. Performance basically allowed us to measure the output from the individual contracts that provided about 30 different logistics services that were supported. We also collected quality data. So performance tells you, hey, how well is the contractor performing, and quality tells you how effective is the contractor's internal processes, training, supply and maintenance activities, et cetera, which really tells you what's the ability of the contractor to provide logistics services and sustain them over a longer term based on capacity approach. So I wanted to show you, this happens a lot, and Walt and I chuckle about this, but this was an aha moment where we were doing some back-of-the-envelope relationship analysis and really identifying what are the dependencies between all these different contracts. And you can see it came down to this is supply support and maintenance were key. And if you think about environments like Afghanistan. This is extended supply chain in harsh environments, so of course your equipment's going to break down faster. Supply supports or having supply and inventory available when you need it is key, and you need to have the capability to hang those parts on the equipment and the aircraft, or else they're just not going to be fixed. So there's a lot of different dependencies on the critical services that were happening on the airfield, like sweeping, like aviation support, like the different types of base support activities like transportation, water supply, food supply, things like that, on supply support and maintenance. So what we did is we came up with an approach to focus our data collection on those key areas, collect and analyze them in theater. We developed a performance evaluation scorecard for each of the contracts based on the critical support performance indicators and their critical failure points that were potential failure points, and we're able to then again refocus our data collection on those key areas. Then what we were doing, because of the type of organization we were supporting, they didn't really want any very complex information, so we had some very simple ways of showing the results of our data collection, and this is showing over time what your level of contracts in different risk categories are, and this is obviously dated. But you could see that they're able to easily track some of their key risk areas, and then once they click on that, they can provide a lot more detail into the specifics. On the right-hand side, we found that very simple line charts were very effective. What I'm missing here is the comments of why things changed over time, but you could see this contract down here is starting to get in a very high-risk area, and it's really important, and it allows them to focus on key logistics support activities. And so through operations research and some simple methods and timely methods, we're able to provide that information for them. So we have a couple more slides, and I'll turn this over to Jack. There's a couple areas that I want to talk about with New Frontiers, and this is really about combining operation research techniques with emerging information management technology. So new data analytics and visualizations. On the left-hand side, there's many different types of data that are currently captured in traditional data storage devices, and these can be stovepiped, meaning you only have access to a few, not across the whole enterprise. And they have these non-traditional data sources, which are different types of formats. They could be text-based, Excel-based, or they could be local databases. And so the whole key in the future is to be able to access and then associate the different types of data together, provide that in mobile or mobile web type of technology, and to support different types of decisions from the unit level up to the enterprise level. So really the key here is to figure out where really to embed operations research methods within this data and visualization environment to support decisions. And so this is one way that we've come up with and are testing out. And this is really new and emerging and probably being tried throughout the DoD contracting community. But a lot of people focus on predictive failures, a lot of people focus on supply chain simulation, and others focused on visualization. And the key is to bring them all together into a knowledge management system that can basically use different algorithms to predict failure, and as I mentioned before, predict how your supply chain responds based on those failures. And they'll be able to mesh that together using different types of business intelligence, and this could be operational information, logistics, and intelligence information to help local commanders make decisions, and then enterprise-level planners make the longer-term budgeting decisions. So my question for you, are you ready to contribute? National security analysis is exciting, and it's something that helps our nation be as successful as we can be. So it's an exciting area for you to get involved in. And once again, like I said, feel free to connect to me. If you do, please reference this webinar so so I have a good context for why you're connecting to me. But I'd be happy to talk to you more about this work or other work that we're doing and opportunities within Engineering. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Jack. And let me figure out how to do that, Jack.
All right. I think you got to pass me the ball.
And I think I just turned that over to you, Jack.
All right. And let me share my desktop. All right. Hopefully everybody can see my desktop. My name is Jack Levis. I'm a Director of Process Management for UPS. I'm also the Vice President of Practice for Informs. I'm going to spend most of the time today talking about the work Informs is doing with analytics, and a couple of minutes about UPS. I've been with UPS 36 years. My job is to set roadmaps for where we need to be in the next 5 or 10 years with our operations systems. And that's our methods, procedures, processes, and systems, mostly for our pickup and delivery fleet, the brown cars you see on the road. 2 of my divisions are advanced analytics divisions. So have a number of OR researchers, which I am not one. But as I'm setting up roadmaps for UPS's future, it's nice because I ensure that operations research is built into the process from day one, and we incorporate that. So let's put on the Informs hat and talk about Informs and analytics. And I'd like to go back to a presentation I made at Informs in January 2010, my first meeting as Vice President of Practice. At that point in time, the word analytics was really not in the Informs vocabulary, but I had been seeing a lot about that in my daily work, a lot of discussion on analytics, and the thought was that Informs should look and see how does OR and analytics relate to each other. What trend is going on? Is this just a buzzword, or is this truly a trend? And if this is a trend, what needs do analytics professionals have that might be different than OR professionals? We decided to do what a good analytics professional would do, and that's gather data. So we commissioned a study. We did research, primary and secondary research, and we also grabbed a member survey to see what the members thought about the topics. Here's some information that came back then. This is a Google Ngram. And we compared operations, research, management science, these terms over a period of years, systems engineering, et cetera. And as you look at the trend over time, you'll see that there were times when each one of the disciplines was king. So I've been an industrial engineer for UPS for well over 30 years. So there's the time of IE, the time of OR, but you notice systems analysis was king. Now they're all declining in their use with the exception of analytics and business intelligence. So that was a piece of the puzzle that came to Informs. This was something real. Businesses have been starting to change how we look at assets. So as an industrial engineer, my job is to properly utilize assets at UPS. So that's people, that's equipment, et cetera. So we all understand assets as planes, trains, automobiles, buildings, and people, of course, is a business's most valuable asset. But organizations are starting to see they have another very important asset, and that's their data. And in order to truly utilize their data, they're going to need people that understand analytics. And that's one of the trends that came out of the study that Informs put together. Now, this is continuing. So Gartner is still telling CIOs that analytics and business intelligence is their top priority. This is important because you got to follow the CIOs. CIOs have a lot of power in organizations, and as they say something needs to happen, organizations start to follow. That happened with ergonomics, that happened with project management, that happened with business analysis. The prediction is business intelligence and analytics is another piece of that puzzle. CIO Magazine is also telling CIOs about analytics trend and how to support them. And then McKinsey comes through and says that by 2018, there's going to be a shortage of analytics professionals. And I find this very interesting. The people that can do the math, the people that can do the heavy lifting, there's going to be a shortage of somewhere between 140 to 190,000 people. But the managers that can manage that group, that can take the information and make better decisions, there's going to be an even larger shortage of about 1.5 million people. And I'm seeing that in business as well. Now, you mentioned earlier, Norm, that there's a wealth in the military for analytics, and I absolutely believe that to be true. Over the last 2 weeks, I've had 2 conference calls with generals in the military who were asking me as a UPS head what we did to become analytically mature, and they wanted to know how to leverage that, and there was huge resonance in what UPS did as a profit organization and what the military can do to utilize their data and analytics. I said that we did a member survey, and I find this interesting. 87% of Inform's members say that analytics and OR are related but different fields. But if you look at that, even though you say that's great, they see the relationship, they're schizophrenic. A third of those people said that analytics is a subset of OR. A third said OR is a subset of analytics. And another third said they're just related but different and join in the middle. Now, even the remaining 13% disagreed. They were split 50-50. Half of them said analytics and OR are exactly the same thing, and the other half said that they're totally different. So even as it informs membership that's close to this, we're not sure what analytics meant, and that meant that the field was wide open for some definition. And out of the study, Informs came up with some definitions that really is resonating with most people. So the bottom portion here is a very elegant and simple definition of analytics from Informs, the scientific process of transforming data into insight for making better decisions. And I think this is a great definition. Scientific means it's quantitative. Process means it's more than just the math. Transforming says you're taking data, turning it into information, into knowledge. And insight says that you're telling me something I didn't already know. And I think this is a brilliant definition. Now, to the left, when you define analytics a little more, there's descriptive analytics, predictive and prescriptive analytics, and they overlap each other. So descriptive, and Norm, you showed a lot of that. A lot of what you had was descriptive analytics that just says, where am I? What happened? Where do I sit? Predictive says, if I continue down my path, what could happen? And then prescriptive is, where should I really be? So where am I? Where am I headed? Where should I be? And in the top one, that's where the optimizations fit. I added this because my experience says that as you move up this ladder, data needs grow significantly, business benefit grows significantly, and so does the necessary skill set of your people. And I think this resonates with most people as they start to use analytics. So out of the study Informs did, there were some very key insights that came out. One is that there was huge differences in the use of analytics in organizations that were mature and less mature. A mature organization had a centralized structure. A less mature organization was decentralized. Mature organizations had an analytics head. Mature organizations were focused on benchmarking against other organizations. Less mature organizations were looking just to get business buy-in internally. And then when it came to recruitment and training, less mature organization had a very informal way to recruit, to train, to hire. But mature organizations knew where to go, what universities to work with, in-house training, et cetera. So those were some of the key insights on the differences. For organizations, though, there were many similarities on what they needed. They all wanted continuing education for their analytics practitioners. They all wanted information on the latest tools and techniques, and for their analytics practitioners to network. There were some additional insights, and the first one is rather sobering. when asking heads of organizations what they thought about OR versus analytics, they said that OR was a toolkit that they only used for some projects. But they saw analytics as what their business does. It's business as usual. It's their business process. And that's what opened up a lot of our eyes on the board is Informs, for the most part, had been focused on the math, but analytics is truly a process that's end-to-end, geared towards true business change and business benefit. The other insight is that the talent pipeline, as McKinsey said, is going to be a key area to address. Some other information that supports that there's more than just math skills is something from Bill Franks, who's the Chief Technology Officer of Teradata. He talks about, of course you need programming skills, of course you need statistics. Those are necessary but not sufficient skills. You need skills in soft skills, you need communication skills, you need listening skills. And that also opened up the door to understand that analytics is much more than the math. So some of the key takeaways for Informs. Most organizations in the world are less mature than Informs members organizations. So if we only looked internally to what our own members need, we're going to miss the big picture because those less mature organizations aren't yet Informs members, but they're having the need. And I'm telling you, I'm seeing that in my daily work. The calls I get from other companies asking how they get started on analytics is tremendous because they can see the benefit of turning data to information, to knowledge. Informs felt that we can provide a role in guiding these new practitioners in this burgeoning field. So as an organization says they want to start moving into analytics and using their data and they start bringing professionals in, Informs can be that organization that can provide that support and can help the practitioners improve their own organizations. And Informs strength is our base of educators. 80% of Informs members are either PhDs or getting their PhDs, and somewhere in the 75% of them work in academia. So we can utilize the strength of Informs to help take advantage or help support the growing field of analytics. And our strength at Informs is really where the most business benefit exists, and that's in the predictive and prescriptive space. So this is where I resonate at my UPS end, and I've only got a couple of slides on UPS, and then I'll close. But at UPS, we're very proud. We think we're a mature organization. Last year, we won the Gartner Business Intelligence Excellence Award for our use of analytics. In the World is Flat by Thomas Friedman. He mentioned, I don't know how he found it, but he mentioned my group in Timonium, Maryland. He called us a think tank. He said that we're working on supply chain problems and that was going to be the key to UPS being a true change agent and a true leader. Of course, we're Informs members. We were a runner-up for an Edelman Prize for the work we did on our air network optimization. And I want to point out why I believe so strongly that the benefits are there for these predictive and prescriptive analytics. So we have an optimization that will determine how these premium packages can flow through our air network. We have a very large 500,000 piece an hour sorting facility in Louisville, Kentucky. And we looked at our current operation and we looked at 3 different alternatives on how to run the Louisville building. The optimization determines how the packages flow. It schedules the airlines. It determines which packages go on which plane. And then it makes sure that those schedules rotate so that we can go ahead and run them day after day. Well, what's nice here is the optimization said, here's our current operation, and we can get some large savings by looking at 3 different alternatives. And you can see there's alternative 1, 2, and 3, 3 being the cheapest alternative. Of course, this is at a given volume level. So we ran 500 different optimizations with different alternatives and many different volume levels, and this really provided us insight. So if volume shrunk, the delta between the current operation and the optimization actually grew, but the alternative stayed the same. If volume started growing, then the alternative switched. No longer is alternative 3 the cheapest, alternative 2 is now the cheapest. Of course, the delta is not so great. So this insight, not only did it tell us how to run the business, but it gave us some huge decisions on alternatives that we never would have done without the analytics, and this is the insight that I love about operations research. We have another optimization, and here I'm just showing you the benefits. This optimizes our drivers' daily routes. So even though our routes are already very well optimized through manual methods, through descriptive and predictive analytics, through prescriptive analytics, we say here's truly the best way to run a route for a given day. And you can see the benefits that we've seen. We have right now 125 people deploying this system full-time. Next year we'll have 425 full-time deploying a system, and these are the gains we're planning on getting from prescriptive analytics, where you take something like a UPS driver who really knows their area and tell them here's a different way to deliver their route, and you can see the gains that we've seen through the prescriptive analytics. That's why analytics is so ingrained in everything UPS does. So turning back to Informs, I said most of this would be about Informs. We do have some short-term direction at Informs, and the first is to develop a certification program, a program where these analytics professionals who probably don't have OR degrees, who may have come from engineering or finance, some way to tell organizations that, yes, somebody is capable of doing their job. Along with that, Informs is going to develop a continuing education program so that after you have your certification, every 3 years you can recertify. So if you're certified, you can get continuing education. If you're not, you can also get some development through the continuing education program. The Informs will change as we move down this path to supporting these members. So we're also aggressively updating our online systems to support collaboration, effective information management, content sharing, etc., so that it's easier to share data across our members. On a quick aside, there's an analytics subdivision at Informs, or a community, that they went from 0 to over 500 members almost overnight. That's the kind of demand we're seeing, and the online systems will help support what those members are looking for. And then finally, and a big one, is for Informs to support external engagement. And you see government, industry, other organizations. Rather than thinking an individual member is a client or a university is a client when it comes down the path of publications, the thought that members' organizations are clients. So are there things we can do for individual organizations like training, like maturity models, things like that, to get Informs and larger organizations engaged? Because remember, those organizations said they were looking for things like information on tools, benchmarking, etc. So with that, that closes my presentation, and then I guess both of us are open for questions.
Yeah, hey, great presentations, both from Jack and Norm, and so very insightful. And definitely want to thank both of you for taking time out of your schedule today to present those. So without any further talk from myself, I want to open up the floor to questions for either Jack or Norm. You can just go ahead and ask the question either verbally, or there's a way to get it to Commander DeGrange through the chat line WebEx online. So with that, I'll ask anyone out there if they want to ask any questions for Jack and Norm.
Yeah, this is Commander DeGrange. From the chat during the briefs, this is for Norm. There was a question for the military distribution analysis example. How long did this project last, and what was the level of effort involved? Just as in people, resources, etc.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
I want to make sure I'm off mute. Yeah, thanks for that question. Yeah, the slide that I had on the Marine Corps distribution analysis was a total of an 18-month effort. What I didn't talk about was there was a lot of, to pull that off at the time, we brought in a third-party logistics provider, a commercial provider, who provided the optimization piece, or the prescriptive piece of what some of the best possible distribution networks might be, and we brought in a couple other partners, we call them, to help with the simulation and to provide some real-world warehousing and distribution analysis. And so it ended up being about over 18-month period, about a $1.2 million effort. We did have a follow-up project that I didn't talk about a couple years later, which basically took the results and laid it out in a more easily to understand process-oriented flows for all the different types of commodities, or including people and different types of functional supply areas, if you will, for the transportation network. Hopefully that answered your question.
Okay, that was all of our chat questions. Anybody is welcome to unmute themselves and ask a question if you're interested.
Hey, this one for Jack. Jack, this is Jeff. And in your presentation, you briefly touched on the certification process. Can you maybe get in a little bit more on the requirements to become certified as a professional, and what the timeline of rolling that out is?
Sure. In fact, I'm just going to go ahead and put it up. Because of time, I took the certification pieces out. So here's the criteria. It's going to be a 3-hour exam. You have to have a BA or BS, and then depending on your degree, the years of experience change. So assuming that you're in a related area, and that could be finance, it could be engineering, there's a number of related areas. With a master's degree, you need 3 years experience. With a bachelor's, 5 years experience. If it's not a related area, you need 7 years of experience. So you're not only testing knowledge, you're testing that you've done the job, and there's also some verification of soft skills from an employer. I do want to put this up. This is the domains of practice. So this is the process. So if you took analytics from day one, it's what's the business problem I'm trying to solve. Now that I understand that, let me frame that as an analytics problem. I've never had an analytics project where data was acceptable when I started. So there's a lot of questions, or a lot of portions of the exam that's going to be on, do you know data? Can you merge data together? Norm, you talked about data in silos, etc. But it's can you work through there? Then selecting a model, building a model, deploying the model, and then managing it. This is a basic practitioner, so it's not going to show that you can actually build the model, but that you can calibrate it, you can run it, you can analyze the outcome of it, but not really that you can build it. It's a basic practitioner.
Okay, thanks. We had another chat question. This is for either speaker. Any lessons learned in missing the mark or goal when using analytics?
Well, I guess, Norm, if you don't mind, I'll go.
Yeah, sure, and then I'll follow up after.
Sure. To me, the key is making analytics part of a business process. So, analytics where you're making long-term strategic decisions is relatively easy. You have a single user. You never really execute the data that was part of the model, so you can live with variabilities of data. You're really saying alternative A is better than alternative B, better than alternative C. That's relatively easy. But Norm, you even mentioned this operational type systems where cycle times are very quick, and the pace is very quick. You need better data. You need supporting systems as part of that. And the analytics has to be part of the job, part of the process you're doing. So when you do analytics for a academic sense, it all fails. When you do analytics as part of somebody's job with the proper support, like analysis tools, the ability to edit results, the ability to truly understand the results, then you'll get some gains. You, of course, need to worry about change management. You have to worry about metrics to analyze if you're gaining results. But when all those pieces are put together, it works well. When you have your job to do and analytics separate, you generally don't get the change you're looking for.
Yeah, to follow up on that answer, to Jack's answer, I agree with what Jack is saying, and really analytics don't fail. It's the practitioner that fails to clearly understand what information is needed in what fashion and to what decision maker. So really the key ingredients to being a good analyst is certainly understanding your toolkit, understanding how to do the analysis and how to process it. But really the key to what I'd call a success or failure is how well the practitioner can really understand the decision maker's framework and how to deliver that information when they need it. And so like Jack said, you can do a study. Studies can be done over periods of time, and they're very important for long-term analysis and long decisions that impact longer-term strategy. However, I think if you want to call it a failure, the failure or I'd say the challenge or the areas for improvement now are really ingraining analytics into the fiber of military organizations. And when I say the fiber, I'm saying making sure that every time that a decision maker is going into a decision brief, that the information provided is from very strong, validated applications, if you will, and that the data is understood and that it's simply displayed. So there's a very big opportunity right now to, because of where technology is, and as Jack pointed out, there's not a lot of prescriptive or optimization-based routine analysis that's being done to support routine decisions right now in the military, and there is opportunities to provide that in a more systems type of approach. So certainly, if there's any failure, to me it's on the practitioner side. It's on our shoulders to make sure we're closing the gap between the powerful information we can produce from the different types of analytics and what the decision makers really need and when they need it.
All righty. Next question for either one. Are there any books or resources that can help getting started or identifying problems or research that is useful in the world of analytics?
Norm, I don't know if you want to grab that first.
Yeah, go ahead, Jack.
Well, I can. There was a book I read recently, which I thought did a great job of framing analytics problems, and I'm trying to see if I can remember the name of the book. I think I gotta get back to you, but it's, I think, Carl, an Informs member, Carl. I can't remember his last name, but it went through the different things that organizations have done, which were not having to do with the math, but it was using their human capital resources to get analytics change within their organization. And I'm gonna have to email it to you after if I can find the name of the book. But it was very good in detailing a process by starting true, almost like our certification, starting with what the true business problem is, making sure that all the resources are engaged, that you have the right resources to finally analyzing it. So I think I can send it to one of you two afterwards, but the book was really well done in that regard. So I'm going to have to look for it.
From my perspective, there's some really good material out there, and obviously that's the base of the question. What I'd recommend is there's a couple thought leaders in the different areas that I talked about, from operations research to business intelligence or visualization and data analytics. From an operations research standpoint, there's a really good thick book, Methods for Conducting Military Operational Analysis, that Moores puts out. Not a plug for Moores or the book, but except that the content in the book is from some really good thought leaders that have been doing military operations research for a long time. So that's something you might want to consider. Once again, that's Methods for Conducting Military Operational Analysis. Another book that I like is from Stephen Few. It's called Now You See It. It's Simple Visualization Techniques for Quantitative Analysis. And I like that for providing simple information results based on complex analysis. It gives you some really good ideas in that area. And if you're into presenting information to senior decision makers, that's probably a good thing to look at and maybe help you tune your skills there. The other is there's some really good work out there on data analytics. And when I say data analytics, I'm talking about how do you bring together multiple different types of data formats from different sources and using semantics. And I don't have anything off the top of my head, but if you do, I want to say Google it, but if you start to key on some of these key thought leaders, you can follow their blogs. And I'm a big fan of following certain blogs. There's companies like SAS and others that have very good thought leader blogs out there, and they're the ideas are well presented, and then usually some type of resources is associated to those. So that would be another point that I'd recommend looking into.
Okay, and we have another question. This one's to Jack about the certification and what determines experience. This person's in the military and uses analytics, but the job is not an analytical job, I guess by title or by job series.
Well, the determining this experience or having done the job for 7 years is somewhat subjective. So what you would do is you would apply, you'd say what your role has been in that 7 years. And there's a team that actually goes through and looks at it. So because analytics is such a broad field, if you're involved in providing information for making quantitative decisions having to do with areas within those 7 domains of practice, it would qualify. And remember, that's only one piece of the puzzle. You have to pass a test, and the test is rigorous. So between the 3 legs of the stool, the education, the on-the-job work, and then the test itself, somebody shouldn't be afraid to apply because their role was, helping, making decisions, or doing financial analysis. I think that would fall into the realm of being on doing the work for that period of time.
All right, I think that is all our questions. There have been several folks that have requested the slide decks. And just to remind everybody, this entire session was recorded, and we'll get this the video link up as quickly as possible. And we'll be providing that to everybody who's online and who couldn't make it. As far as the slide decks, for the speakers, Norm and Jack, or can we provide that out to everybody?
Sure.
Yeah, I'm fine with that as well.
If somebody send me an email address where to send it, and then you can forward it from there.
Okay, and what we can do is just we can post those with the video, so then people can either download the slide decks or watch the video and the presentations. All right, with that, I guess I'll turn it over to Jeff, and we'll close up.
Yeah, thanks, Walt. And again, I wanted to thank Norm and Jack for taking time out of their schedule for the presentations. Those were awesome, and based on the questions, awesome questions from the group as well. That pretty much wraps this WebEx up, and I want to call us to let everyone know that our next event is tentatively scheduled for the January time period, and the planning committee will be working on that between now and then, and we'll be sending out the meeting notifications for the students and those who want to participate. And like Walt said, we will be posting the audio and video for this on the websites. And if anyone else needs more information, again, the 2 links on the front slides will help you out through both organizations, Moores, and Informs Mass. So that's it from my perspective. I'll pause for anything from Walt or Julie. Other than that, I thank everyone for their participation, and Hope you have a good weekend and a Merry Christmas and Happy Holiday season. Walt, Julie, anything from you?
This is Julie. I want to thank everybody for attending and let you know that the planning team is anticipating the next topic as being related to presentation, whether it's presentation by a PowerPoint slide like in a webinar setting, or if it's a presentation in a large conference setting or a poster session, and how the different strategies are for presenting information in those three arenas.
Yeah, and this is Walt. Just one quick reminder, if you go back to the links that were provided, the first webinar actually describes what the Joint Student Membership Program is all about. And we'll give you a brief overview of both MORS and Informs Mass, and if you're interested in finding more about the program. And that's it.
Awesome. Thanks, Julie, Walt, and again, thanks everyone for joining us today. Like I said, happy holidays and Merry Christmas to everybody.